Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, content, marketing, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Ted Harrison. He's the founder and CEO of New Motion, a creative agency specializing in neuroscience-driven video content and training. He has a background as the former head of production at Twitter and X. He's been on the big agency side, working at some PR firms that you've all heard of. He's a really interesting guy. He's also an author, which is so cool to see. We're lucky to have Ted on the show. Ted, welcome.
Well, thanks, Adam. I'm excited to be here. When you read all that back, it makes me sound, like I've really accomplished some things. So I appreciate you with that intro.
Yeah, you're an impressive guy. You don't have to be humble about it. I think all the work you've done, and I like the fact that you've written a book, which we'll talk about as well. But let's start out really simply. I watched the video on your site, and I love the fact that you spent time researching attention. I don't know if many marketers and advertising people actually take the time to do that. And so, since I guess that's like the big thesis of your company, do you want to tell us, like, I guess, how you see attention in the internet age, and maybe some of the things that us advertisers are all missing about this really simple concept?
Yeah, no, it is. It's funny because I think I've for a long time been a victim of it. And there's plenty of areas in advertising and beyond that I feel like I'm still in that space where it's like, wait, do I actually know this? Do I understand this thing? But when it comes to attention, kind of the long and short version of this story is there's no very quick way of saying this, but basically at Twitter, the ad products were always kind of behind where other platforms were. And meanwhile, I was in all these meetings with creative executives because part of my job there was just kind of like educating on how to make better content on the platform. And I kept going, you need to get attention. You need to get attention. And the problem with that, like telling people something, is that you probably should really know what it is. And I don't mean the definition of the word. I mean, like, what are our brains doing to actually give attention? So I got curious, and honestly, in a couple, after coming out of a few conversations where a lot of people were saying back to us, like, we love the platform. We just really, this is pre-Elon. So back before it was X, people are going to be like, we love the platform. We just really struggle to figure out how to make the performance what we needed to be in order to invest our media dollars there. And so I was like, well, let's do some digging. And so I've now kind of crafted a hobby for myself. I'm not sure if it's the most fun hobby, but it's really like kind of going into research papers on particular topics that are not in your typical like mainstream, like what you'd read on like Adweek, or a profile on how things might come to life for a campaign somewhere in Substack, but more so like the scientific research that backs a lot of our understanding of how something actually works inside the human brain, or just a topic in general. So I went down a rabbit hole on like researching a ton of things that were publicly available through like Harvard research studies and MIT to really like understand what the brain is doing in order to give attention, and came up with some interesting things that then we started to apply, and actually got in some of those meetings back with some of the people who had kind of initially said, hey, we don't know if this is the right fit for us now. But once they started testing and piloting some of the principles we were utilizing, we were getting in the ballpark. And so really up-leveling the product. And I can stop teasing it so much, but like attention really in our brains, we're constantly looking for two things. And this is a slight oversimplification, but it's the most relevant for marketers. We're looking for context and we're looking for location. And that's because, first of all, if you just like woke up every single day, Adam, and you like had no context, like imagine waking up every day, you have no idea where you are, what's going on. Like that's this terrifying thought. So it's like going back to like a root thing for us as humans is like, we kind of want to know why we are where we are at. And I think that's something that we often miss when it comes to attention, is like actually providing the context for why something matters, and like actually doing something contextually relevant. So especially for like out of home advertising in particular, it's like, is it contextually relevant to the environment? Is that something that's going to lead and draw attention in? And some of this may be stuff that it's like, oh, I've actually know this, but when you start to put like actual details and research behind it, you start to unlock other things that really help you understand how to take the most advantage of it. So that's the context piece. And then on location, it's really about how you can space things out. Our brains are trying to like make sense of that context. And so that I'm sure there's like a famous like image that goes viral every couple of years where it's like you're reading this and now you're reading this, and it's like kind of like hierarchies out like how people like view like text on a screen. And so there's some of those principles at play, but it's also just true. One of the things that we figured out is that when you're just scanning the world around you, if you've learned to read from left to right, you're predetermined to start in the top left corner, move to the middle of an image, to go to the top right, and then back to the middle before taking the rest of it in. That happens in about 13 milliseconds. But understanding that as a location like basis of like where things should be, top left, then in the middle, top right, and then kind of everything else, really helps you understand how to frame the visuals of your content in a way that can get the right message across at the right time in how you're trying to do it. And then also figure out ways in which, you can break that. Whenever you like introduce a human face looking a certain direction, they're going to follow that gaze. And those types of things are like built on top of just the default mode, which is that top left, middle, top right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And as you were talking, one thing I was thinking about is um how do you think about the notion of just getting people's raw attention versus trust? So like I think it's obviously very important to grab someone's attention. It's a force multiplier. You can't do anything if people don't pay attention to you. It's like the first step. But I think trust is something a bit slower. So I guess if you're a brand, how do you balance kind of optimizing your way into having like weird Mr. Beast thumbnails with someone's mouth open versus, actually having your brand values? Is there a balance there? Does it have to result in sort of like weird things that kind of that kind of might be a little spamish, or you're saying no, you don't have to go down that route if you're a big company and there's better ways to get people's attention in a way that would translate to trust?
Yeah. So I think that this all comes back to, before we even get to like where we want to start getting attention, the first question is like, what are we actually trying to achieve? And we're largely at NewMotion in the business of B2B brand marketing. That's like really where our wheelhouse is. And I think that when we first have conversations, I think a lot of B2B marketers in particular, but I think this goes for everybody, is immediately like, we do have to get attention. It's like, we know that. And so the default is to go to like Mr. Beast, or what are these creators doing that get attention? Or can we blow something up? That's like, those are things that are inherently going to get attention. But when it comes to how we think about what we want to do to build trust, which is the goal of B2B brand marketing in particular, is we have to start thinking about like, are we directing attention to the right place? So this is similar to how we want to do it in on the screen. So we often will sometimes like actually introduce a human in a specific point in a piece of content, particularly in paid media, to understand or to get people to look at like actually what our message is. So it's like getting people to turn their certain way in the shot so that then whenever that message shows up, we're getting that direct attention there. And it can't be something that's like, oh, here's a clickbaity title. It has to be like something of like intrinsic value for what your target customer would want to see or know. And I think that it's often mistaken that you have to do something splashy, when in reality, what you can do is be thinking about how you're regaining attention throughout the course of a video, because it doesn't just start at the beginning of a piece of content or even on an image. It's about like how we get attention and then also maintain that attention. And that can go into images too, for how like that state, how it has staying power. And there's other things like that as well. But the video example I like to use is actually outside of B2B. It was just this simple. We did this work with Lego when I was at Twitter. So before I was at NewMotion, or before we started NewMotion. And we were perplexed as to why this one piece of video content that was just like introducing a new random Lego set. It wasn't even like a specialized like Star Wars version or something like that. It was just a new Lego set that they were introducing with some like characters that were in it. And we saw the retention rate was the highest that they had on any video for the last year. And we were curious as to why that was the case. And so when we were looking at it through this lens of understanding more of what attention is, what we noticed is that they kept moving the message around, and it was like every 3 seconds there was a new part of the story like unfolding. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people on the brand side in particular are like caught up in, is they think I've got to get everything out like right at the beginning, because otherwise I'm going to lose the audience. When in reality is if you do the right work to like introduce new things consistently, you can kind of keep that momentum of attention moving forward into the actual message that you're trying to convey.
Yeah, I love that. I think the importance of pacing in your storytelling, whatever format it might be in, whether it's writing, whether it's a video, it's really important to keep people's attention, not bore them. Another thing that I've talked about a lot of marketers and some marketers on the show about is sort of the notion of this barbell content strategy, where you do things that do get quick attention and maybe get people to stop scrolling or stop in their day and think like briefly. And then when you've earned the permission, then you send them, the longer piece, the white paper, whatever it might be, the guide. Doesn't have to be a boring white paper, could be way more interesting. So I think there's something to that where you kind of have to earn people's permission for them to, read something a little bit deeper from your team or watch a full 20-minute video about your product. Like you kind of can't ask for that right away. There's also the dating analogy people have used before. You have to date your customers before they actually marry you and you become one. So I think that, I think the marketers that are doing really well are thinking, as you noted, well beyond just doing something to grab people's attention really quickly. They have to go beyond that. So I want to switch gears a little bit. You've worked at two really good traditional PR firms, and you've been at bleeding tech companies like Twitter. And so I wonder if you have any lessons for either side that you want to share, because we have a lot of marketers on both sides of the table. So like, what would you tell your tech team that you learned from the trad PR world? And maybe what would you tell trad PR about, the people that are just on the tech side of the trade?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the, the the first thing I would say, and I'll start on the like tech, going back to the like agency side of things, especially now that I'm running an agency. I feel like that's like I'm constantly having to tell myself some of this stuff. Is that things that you want to achieve in a year are very difficult, or you're probably most likely like over projecting what you're going to get done, right? Like being very clear. And the reason I say this to agencies and stuff is because there's this, we got to move quickly. Everything's got to be fast because we have to continue to deliver on whatever it is our clients are asking for. But then you underestimate what you can do over the course of like 3, 4, 5, even years or a decade. I worked for 7 years at Twitter, and it's funny how many times I remember like going into review sessions with like across all the things that we were trying to accomplish at the company and feeling like, oh, we're like taking forever to get this thing done. But then when I look back at all that was actually accomplished at my time, it's like very easy for me to see it. And I've started to see it even at the end of my time. I would say it definitely got weird at the end of my time because I was there a year post acquisition. But particularly in that first like 6 years when I was really reflecting on some things, the amount of movement that occurs in that time frame is actually quite significant. And I think that that's what I would say back to the agencies is like take a longer view. I think there's so much focus on delivering quickly for clients because you have to service something or you have to hit a benchmark or an impression goal or whatever it may be. And the reality is a lot of, especially the tech side of things, they're trying to build businesses that last not today and tomorrow, but a century from now. And so whenever you're thinking through that lens, it helps afford you the opportunity to think a little bit more strategically and laying things out. And then on the flip side of that, there are things at tech, I think, that often get misconstrued. I would tell the tech people, a platform or in big tech in general, that enjoy the benefits, because there is definitely a number of benefits and that exist in being able to work at a place like that, but also to really think through how to actually brief the people that you're looking to work with. And that obviously that's related to what we do at NewMotion, where we're taking briefs from our customers. But I think it goes beyond that, and really in anything that you're working on or collaborating with partners, even internally, is like when you take the time to actually set up a brief and help contextualize, not to bring that word back, but we'll do it anyway. What is actually trying to be accomplished, you actually get to a better result. And the more that you can kind of invite more people in, the better your end result will be. It's too often a lot of tech companies get very insular. And I think that that's one of the things that the agency side really helps bring things out is you get another perspective.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point about the insular nature of some of these, not just tech companies, but just larger companies. Sometimes you see them launch ads, like the Jaguar campaign or several others in recent memory that I won't name, but that cause a big backlash. And as an ad pro, you're just sitting there scratching your head like, why did they not think that this would have this reaction? And I think it can happen to any large org. So to your point, getting additional getting feedback is so easy in the internet age. Even if you're a smaller company, you can instantly run a quick poll or run a test campaign and just get instant feedback. If you can even ask the AI, you can tell the AI, hey, I want you to give me perspectives from 10 different kinds of consumers. And it's just so easy now. So it kind of breaks my brain when I see a campaign sort of, unless it was like the intent was for it to create a bunch of backlash and troll people, and I get that too. So it's an interesting time to be in our space, because I just think people do get into their little bubbles and they don't get that external perspective, and it's really dangerous, especially in a connected world.
Yeah, and I think it's especially true, honestly, for marketing and media teams, because you're ingesting the talking points so consistently that it's like it becomes easy to forget about what's going on around you that would actually impact how it might be construed externally. And then your marketing often ends up looking like you're advertising to yourself.
Totally. So let's talk more about creativity. You wrote a book on creativity, which is awesome. I've added it to my reading list. I'm sorry I couldn't get to it before the show, but a topic that we do talk about with our guests is creativity. And so one thing that we've seen and a lot of people have commented on is the notion of like stuck culture, where there's just infinite sequels. The same reboots are being made. We're just milking people's nostalgia forever instead of investing in new storylines and new franchises. And so what do you think has gone wrong here? Because this has happened on the ad side as well. There's a lot of complaints that advertising isn't as original or interesting. What do you think that brands can do to maybe get unstuck and actually embrace risk and do some novel new creative, and not just have the same celebrity style ads and look the same as everyone else?
No, I love this question, and I love the fact that you're calling out a great point that I don't think AI is making this problem in particular go away anytime like soon. I think I recently saw at like some trade show 2 different AI companies were showcasing, and they both had like basically the exact same messaging at their booths because they just went to AI to create it. And so I think that like is only going to perpetuate some of this problem that exists. I think that a couple of things. So in the book that you mentioned, I have this like outline for like basically 7 questions to be asking to determine if your concept, which I try to distinguish in the book between a concept and an actual idea, um, how you make that an actual idea then worth executing. And so within the 7 questions, I won't like get into all of them right here, but I think one of them that I think gets like over indexed, even though I think it should just be 1 point in a scale, is, do I have existing evidence that this will succeed? Right? Like, do I have like, okay, I can point to something or whatever. I think often we think it's really hard. That's what a lot of people are looking for, whether it's in creating new IP or doing another sequel to something, or even in advertising, like how can we just like replicate what has worked before? Because it's easy to go, oh, well, look, we have proof that this worked before. And so we go back to it. And so instead of viewing that question, that what the question is as part of this series of 7 is, do I have existing evidence that this will succeed? Which is almost treating creativity like a hypothesis in the scientific method to a certain extent. Because hypotheses do require some evidence for it to be an actual hypothesis. You're not like making a wild guess. You are going in with some semblance of before you test. And I think that what we should be doing is looking more at like what the insight is and what the audience cares about. So instead of looking at things, I think we take too often things at face value. We'll look at a show and go, oh, well, people like that, so let's have the same characters do the same thing, instead of going, okay, well, what are the motivations of that character? And is that why people enjoyed this IP? How do I take that and put this in a different setting with a different world in a new objective And really the anchor for this is like, what is this character's intrinsic motivation or whatever it may be. That is what can tell a better story elsewhere. That's what inspiration is, instead of just like copy, paste, move forward. And then another thing that I think in general that we struggle with when it comes to creativity is everything, going back to everything is so fast on the internet. It feels like we have to be kind of like ready with the next thing. And I think that ultimately just kind of lends itself to an environment where laziness of thought is paramount, in a way. And it's like a weird incentive. The more that we can just like kind of do the thing that we think is working, going back to like clickbaity thumbnails or whatever else, we're like, oh, we can just like do this, and this is like kind of working because I need to be able to show immediate results, and you get rewarded for it. And so like that, there's a little bit of like push and pull there where it's like, ultimately, if you really want to stand apart, especially when it comes to your advertising and what you're standing for as a brand, you really need to kind of pull back and get into originality of thought instead of a laziness or lazy version of it.
Yeah, and to your point about looking at what worked, something that I really like is the notion of one industry taking ideas from another industry that's totally unrelated. So an example of that, I noticed, I think you had, I think you have Salesforce as a client. I might have seen that on your website,
Yeah.
but Salesforce marketing team back in the day had this kind of brilliant idea where they staged a fake protest outside Moscone Center, like protesting software with their little no software signs. And like, that's a tactic like from the political world that a software company thought to do. I still remember it. It was so memorable where they had the, protesting against software because of SaaS. And, they were early to the SaaS game. They're still the number one CRM. So like, you could take an idea that's been done by something else and just make it your own. And it feels novel because it's net new for your sector, right?
Yeah, exactly. We actually did. So speaking of Salesforce, we did something recently. We just won the Webby for this last year with a campaign we did with Salesforce, where if you're familiar with the influencer Corporate Bro, his real name is Ross Pomerantz, but he does a lot of workplace satire. And so what we did is, there's been a string of like different influencers entering into TV spots, whether that's the Super Bowl or elsewhere. But the center of the ad itself was the influencer. It's almost like that's like the point of like, it's like, oh, we're doing a TV spot with this person you've seen on TikTok, essentially. And a lot of it in the consumer space. But what we did is we just Easter egged Ross into a commercial as an antagonist against Matthew McConaughey in a commercial. And then we spun him off into his own little AI world that existed on social. And I think that one of the things that I loved about that is it was a nod to the audience. It was like really inviting the audience into like, hey, wait. I know like that I've seen that guy. And then sure enough, online, there was tons of comments on YouTube and Instagram and everywhere else that the commercial was posted is like, is that Corporate Bro? Is that is that you? And then of course we did this whole series of him being kind of playing in the AI Wild West, because it was back when Matthew McConaughey was playing like a rough and tumble guy in the AI Wild West in the spots. So it's another example to your point of like, how do I take an inspiration? So we were looking at like, oh, people are interjecting it, but how do we like do this in an Easter egg type way as a nod to our audience that might really be in on the joke?
Yeah, and I love that campaign, and B, I remember when Corporate Bro had like 1,000 YouTube subscribers and no one knew who he was. And actually, it's such a testament to the fact that he's not an overnight success. He's been creating, short videos and skits for like at least over a decade now. So it's funny when people say like comment about an influencer who comes from nowhere. In a lot of cases, like this example, he's been refining his craft in his comedy for a while.
Yeah.
I love to see that he's working in Salesforce ads. I will have to check out that campaign. So in terms of let's move on a bit back to your kind of the insights of your company. So how exactly, when you're taking on a client, how do you factor in neuroscience into their campaign and sort of the insights that you've had along the way of how people look at things and how people process information?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that we often will say that, and I think that puts us ahead, obviously I'm biased in a number of areas in this regard, is that it's really nice to come into a room with with someone that's like looking to do great work, and like want to work together to accomplish an objective, because I love being able to go, hey, we're not going to really have to worry too much from the outset about how are we going to hit KPIs, right? Because like we know how to structure this content in the end result. So in the post-production or how we shoot it to get the attention that we need to get the right lift, depending on what the, where we're at in the funnel in terms of how we're developing this campaign. So let's take our time developing the real insight and idea and structure, and we root it in whether it's surveys or just like general information we can aggregate to like understand the audience's core problems and then be able to address those in a way that build trust. And so that feels like I'm glossing over the neuroscience part of it, but in a way, it's almost like it's actually like a frame for us to be like, hey, like this is like done. Like this is like we know this part is going to work. And so instead of having to like be worried from the outset, like how's our content going to be structured or shot, or how's that going to be taken care of, we're kind of like past that point in how things work. Because we know it. And it's not just us. Like a lot of the examples we use when we're talking about this is actually like famous filmmakers, whether it's Wes Anderson, Steven Spielberg, and beyond. People often forget that these movies require a ton of time, but it's ultimately like 90 minutes to maybe a couple 2.5 hours or so. And every single frame, when you start to think about it, 24 frames per second, is like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars being invested into like what that frame looks like. And so they're like it's easy to look at a filmmaker and go, oh, they're artistic, they're very good at what they do. But the truth is, these people have like studied and understand how we're all viewing this content and know exactly where, not just in general on the screen to get our attention, but to the specific pixel that we see on our screen, like how to be we're all looking in the same places because of those methods. And whether they know it as neuroscience or not, it's actually like it's one-to-one transfer time and time again in terms of how they do it.
So I have to ask, because I asked this question to all of our guests because everyone has thoughts and opinions on it. I guess you can answer either through video or just marketing in general, but I'm curious your vibes on AI. Is AI helping you a lot? Are you using it for synthesis, for editing? Are you using it for scripting? I'm curious what you're using it for here, and also maybe just however you want to take the AI question is fine.
Yeah, no, there's so many different ways we could go. The biggest thing for us is we do use AI. I think I kind of think that we're nearing it's sooner rather than later that not using AI in your job will be almost similar to showing up to work without a computer. Like I think people who think that they're not going to be using AI at all are either misunderstanding the technology or they're like overly fearful of it. In the same breath, we actually put out like an essay not that long ago about kind of our take on AI in the industry. And I think that the real challenge at the moment for any type of content that's being created, whether it's video, image, or even writing, is that basically the next step in the uncanny valley. So if you're familiar with the uncanny valley, we had this like long period of time where the question was, are we ever going to be able to create an AI that like, or create something that's not human and have it feel human? And I think it's like pretty fair to say we've crossed the uncanny valley. And I think it's then easy to go, okay, well, we've solved it. But the reality is there's almost always another challenge. I think we likened it in the essay to like crossing the American plains and then being like, okay, cool, I got past Kansas and everything's good now, right? It's just all flat from here. And it turns out the Rockies are on the other side. And so we're kind of calling this like new thing the Hollow Canyon. And what that is ultimately, and to make it simple, is everything looks pristine, but there's an emptiness to it, because really artwork, whether that's in marketing or in our messaging or even the products that we create, they're being built to solve a real human problem. And I think that over time, when everything starts to feel the same and almost too polished, actually, Adam, this is so funny. I just before we got on here, I spilled a little bit of coffee on my shirt. And I was like, oh, that's so annoying to be on video, which I know most people are listening in, but there's some people probably watching on video. And I was like, it's going to be on my shirt. And it's like, actually a little bit of messiness is helpful. I think it's going to, like, we need to be having a little bit of messiness in our content. And I think that's what's rising at the moment, because while AI is an incredibly powerful tool, and again, we use it every day, and I can get into some specific examples of that too. It can't solve all the problems that we have. And I also think that if it replaces our thinking, we're in a world of trouble when it comes to getting anything original or anything meaningful, because artwork or anything intrinsically that it related to communications at all that comes from something that can't actually experience what we experience as humans is going to inevitably feel hollow. So yeah, so that was kind of my overall take on it. So more messiness, more coffee stains in video, and maybe a little bit more imperfection is probably good for us.
Yeah, I love that. The sort of proof of human is something that does add to video content. It's funny because um we have such a rush to embrace AI on the ad side and the business side. And then if you look at the auteur side, we've had CGI for however many years, and yet people at the top of their game, like Christopher Nolan, still crashes a physical 747 into a building in Tenet, right? And he could have just CGI'd the whole scene. And so it's either unsatisfying for him to do that, or there's just something missing from the chaos and the randomness created when you do things in the physical space, that maybe it's just more fun. Maybe it could be as good, but it's always going to be more fun to play with things in the physical space. And I think that's something that the pure tech nerds kind of miss, and the creative people kind of get. Like, if you watch like a Casey Neistat video, like, he's a tech nerd and he makes digital video, but also he likes to play with tangible media. And I think there's something to that would be lost if everyone was just purely, digital, and everyone got rid of all of their physical gear, and we didn't film on sets.
Yep.
So
yeah, no, I mean, there's a reason that Tom Cruise is getting tens of millions of views for him doing the crazy stunts that he does, and they're not faked. And I think that um, I think the Christopher Nolan example is a great example of that. We're always going to need something that really, and I think what you're hinting at in all of that is like the fun piece. Actually, a central tenet of the book. So definitely another piece for you, or another check mark for you to read it. Just fun, having fun. I think is a critical component. But I think more than that, it's like there's meaning behind it. Like, this is someone's taken time and effort, made effort in those types of things. When I think about the out of home ads that stand out, or the things on social that we're creating that really stand out, it's when we're actually connecting dots and creating a piece of content that actually is like human in a way. Those are the things that are most successful. Those aren't just things that win awards. Those are things that actually resonate with the audience you're trying to reach. And yeah, it doesn't mean that I don't use, I mean, I have literally like TED GPT. So that's like got all of my writing and like email and all that kind of stuff that I can like go back and forth with throughout a given day to be able to get to either enhance my thinking, or to at least draft up basic notes or documents that I've repeatedly done. Like, that's very useful. But or even AI that helps clean up like audio. We use that all the time. That's like game changing, because it's like, oh, I there was a loud noise in the background of this one shot, but it was the best take, and now we're able to clean it up. That's amazing for us from a technological perspective, but it's not really inherent to the creation process, if that makes sense.
no, it does totally. And I think the most exciting thing is AI democratizing access for people without a lot of money. So if you're a small brand and you don't have much money, you might still be able to have really nice B-roll for your ad that you wouldn't be able to get normally, or maybe it's too expensive, or it's not exactly what you want. And so, using it as kind of to be able to step up and seem bigger, more authoritative, more professional than you are, I think it is something that's helpful, especially because you're up against increasingly large companies with infinite more money. So if it's a democratizer, I'm totally for it. The other thing you mentioned that's interesting is, why is Tom Cruise so interesting? He's film being jumped out of a plane, and it's a real event. He's actually doing the stunt, and it's kind of the same reason we like to go see a band live, even if we could hear the recording, because it's risk, right? They could mess up, or the slight imperfections make it. There's that je ne sais quoi of seeing something live. And I think we can tell. I think we're like hardwired to be able to tell. Maybe AI will get so good you can't. But to your point on context, if you know that it's real, it just becomes that much better, I think. And so I think that we'll continue to see humans and physical sets in the mix. And, I don't think we'll go into a full postmodern future where, nothing is real and we're fully in the matrix. But hopefully, it doesn't get to that point. So one final question, Ted, we like to ask all of our guests, and this question becomes increasingly interesting during times of layoffs and consolidation in AI. But what advice would you give young people entering the marketing field now to have a successful career, or if they're just starting a business? What would you say to our young peers at this point?
Yeah, there's so many things. And so I try to getting to the one is always challenging in this, because there's probably 3 to 5 that I think would be, okay, here's a good base. But the one thing I will say that I don't think I hear enough, invest in your peers. And by that, I mean, whether it's people looking for, if you're without a job at the moment, trying to break into the industry, or you are already at somewhere, don't just be looking to climb the ladder, but invest in the people that are at your level. And the reason I say that is because before you know it, you'll look up in 4 or 5 years, maybe 10 years down the line, and that person who was the junior copywriter who you joked with in a conference room, or you were Slack messaging on the side all the time, is now head of copywriting at or director of brand marketing at a big company, and those types of things. It doesn't take long for people to move up whenever because it'll be here before you know it. So invest time in the people around you. It's one thing that I wish I had done more of. I think I've got a number of great examples where that's been great for me, where I have invested that time. And now I know people who are great, even just to bounce ideas off of. But that is something that's really paramount, is to remember that the people you're working with now are the people who are going to ultimately be decision makers down the road in various places, and have swaying power over another job opportunity for you, or growth and beyond.
I love that answer. I don't think anyone said that on the show. I think that's really good. Ted, where can people go to connect with you online? We'll also put links in the show notes, but for people who are just listening, where should they go?
Yeah, well, you can obviously head to newmotion.com, which that's NEUE motion.com for anyone who's listening. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Ted Harrison. That's where I'm posting most frequently, sharing lots of insights about B2B marketing and beyond, and us just building NewMotion. We've gone from 0 people to 15 full-time in just a little under 2 years, which is great. And then also, obviously, on Twitter/X, I'm still active there on occasion. And my handle is TedVid, so TEDVID. And so, yeah, check me out there. And if send me a message, shoot me an email. You can find it in one of those places, and I'm pretty good at responding. So just send me a note.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, Ted. And we will see you all next week for another episode.